Hi everyone, welcome back to Cody's Lab. So up on the hillside behind me are some yellow flowers, and I have a sample of it in my hand right here, and this is called Dyer's Woad. This is considered a noxious weed in this part of the country because it is quite bitter, and so nothing really eats it except maybe goats. And it covers entire hillsides, it grows like crazy, and it crowds out other plants. So it's actually targeted as a eradication program where the county has actually offered a bounty on this at some times. Now what happened originally is this was imported from Europe because you could actually make dye from its leaves. Its leaves actually contain a blue pigment which is chemically very similar to indigo. It just has a lower concentration than the indigo plant does. And so what this plant was originally used for was extracting that blue dye and using it to dye fabrics and things a blue color, which blue is a very difficult color to achieve. But nowadays, of course, blue dyes are very easy to synthesize chemically, and so this plant is completely obsolete in terms of the blue dye extraction. But I figured that since that is something that it was used for, and I've got plenty of it, I thought I might try it out and see what it takes to actually extract the blue dye from this stuff and actually dye something with it. So in my experiments, every part of this plant really actually does have small amounts of the blue dye. The leaves have the most, and I've noticed that the very young plants, like these little tiny seedlings, have the most dye per volume. I'm not actually sure if that's because it contains more or if it's easier to extract, because these older leaves have like a waxy coating, whereas these younger ones are nice and fuzzy. And so I assume it's easier to extract it from them. But let's pick a bunch of it and go back home and start extracting. Now that I've got the leaves back home, it's time to process them. And the first thing we gotta do is chop them up into little pieces so that I can extract the dye more easily. Alright. Now I got these all chopped up. Got a pan of water on the stove, which I'm going to dunk these in. I'm just going to add the leaves to the very hot water. I'm just going to push the leaves down into the water, give them a bit of a stir, and then let them sit there for about 10 minutes to let it steep and make woad tea, I guess. Now that this is cooled off, I'm going to filter off the leaves to extract the juices. So now I'm going to add in some washing soda. This is sodium carbonate. Really any base would work. First of all, I'm going to dissolve it into some water just to make sure it all dissolves. The dye just forms in an alkaline environment. Historically they would have used soda ash or even just straight hardwood ashes to do this, but living in modern times I've got a little bit of a shortcut here. So now that it's dissolved, I'm just going to add this in there. I'm not really measuring most of the ingredients because it really just needs to be basic. It's not really reacting with the carbonate much. Now what this does is actually it's turning the dye blue, but it doesn't really look blue yet, does it? That's because there's a lot of yellow pigment in there, and it's combining with the blue pigment that I just formed, and it's just making it green. So now I've got to get this blue pigment out of there without the yellow. Another step here is that some of the blue is actually dissolved into solution. I want to get this blue to fall out of solution, and to do that I've got to oxidize it, because in an oxidizing environment the blue dye is non-soluble, whereas the yellow should be. So I'm just going to put this into a jar with some air and give it a good shake to aerate it. Now that it's had some time to settle out, you can see that the dye, or the pigment, is down on the bottom of this jar. It looks green, but I assure you it is blue. We just got to wash the rest of that yellow out. So what I'm going to do is stick a tube in there, which I have right here. I'm going to siphon the fluid out down to about this point, and I'm going to fill it back up with water, and repeat until this water above this is just about clear. So now that I've washed it a few times, you can definitely see that the pigment is blue. Very nice. I'm also running the water out one last time. Looks like I'm losing a bit of pigment there, but it's not really that big of a deal. I'll get this put into a little bottle now. So now for the hard part. You see, I could just dry this out and then rub it on something and that would make it blue, but it wouldn't be like waterproof. You could just wash it right off. What I need to do is dissolve this dye into a liquid and then soak that into the fabric and then reprecipitate the dye out, like convert it back into the insoluble form while it's inside the fabric. Now there are chemical methods to do that. There's a chemical they use, it's thiourea dioxide, which reduces the dye and can make it so it dissolves back into solution. But in ancient times they would have used a fermentation process. So I think I'm actually going to do that, especially since I don't actually have any of that chemical on hand and it's rather difficult to track down, it turns out. In ancient times they would actually use fermented urine. And this is, of course, pee, which is a couple of days old now. You can see that the proteins are starting to coagulate and fall out. But the idea here is that bacteria will actually be using up all of the oxygen inside the solution, and then they'll be so hungry for oxygen that they'll start to steal it from the dye. And then, once they've stolen the oxygen from the dye, it'll become soluble. Temporarily, of course. It's rather disgusting, but I don't mind it too much. I've worked with fermented urine quite a lot in my YouTube time, so let's just add a little bit of this to there. And let's wait a few days and see if the dye actually dissolves. So I decided to put all of the dye that I had in there because if it doesn't work, so I can always go get more. But yeah, I see no reason why this wouldn't work. I'll just keep this lid closed, put it in a warm place, and hopefully the bacteria will consume all the oxygen and turn this back into the yellow color of pee. Then I can put my cotton shirt in there and see if I can dye it. Ah, my chicks are chirping. Well, one of them is. Got some partridge eggs in there and they appear to be hatching. But also, I've been keeping this pee bottle on top of it because it's kind of a warm place to set it. And you'll notice the dye is actually lighter in color and it appears like there's less of it. So this might actually be working now. Yeah, it's definitely, it builds up a little bit of gas in there and it's starting to smell really bad. I actually ended up inoculating it with a little bit of material from the rabbit pen, and that really caused it to take off. It's not completely finished, I don't think, but you know what? It's starting to smell really bad, and my girlfriend wants me to get it out of here, so I'm gonna see if I can dye the shirt with it now. Here's the bottle of urine and Woad, and here is a t-shirt that I've been soaking in some deoxygenated water. That'll help the dye soak into it. So, let's put it in it. You notice I'm wearing gloves for this. This smells really bad. It's like the men's bathroom of a particularly unclean truck stop or something. Alright, so let's squeeze a bunch of this water out. Just stick this in there. Okay. I'm going to put this beaker in there to weigh it down. Hopefully, oh dear. That may be too big. It's staying under. Let's just take that out and close the lid. I'm gonna let this sit for a few hours. I'm actually gonna go to lunch with my sister. See you guys back in a little bit. Let's pull this out of there. See how it looks. It looks thoroughly greenish. Smells really bad. Okay. Let's open it up. See how it looks. It's supposed to turn blue as soon as it hits the air. How about that? I just went to go wash my hands off and I came back and it's blue. Oh man, that worked perfectly. Alright, I'm going to let that blue up a little bit more and then I'm going to give it a good washing and hopefully it keeps its color. So after washing it a couple of times to remove the incredibly foul urine smell, it has also removed a bit of the color, but it is still noticeably blue. I guess I could dip it a couple more times into the dye bath and maybe not fold it up so tight so that the dye can actually penetrate in, because it looks like it got to the outsides of it a little bit better than the inside here. But it definitely worked and you guys can see the proof of concept. I think this is very amazing. If I was living back in the Middle Ages and somebody was able to do that, I would have called him a magician. That is so cool seeing that convert right before our eyes. Well, your guys' eyes. But anyway, I'm going to put this on. And there we go. I'm wearing a shirt that was, well, let's just not think about it. It was dyed using an ancient method. That's pretty cool. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you next time.